Hello and welcome to the EDHRECast, where we're all about commander, data, and dad jokes. I'm Joey Schultz and I'm joined by my fantastic co-host. He's super bummed that he can't cast the spell Ultima in a deck led by the commander named Ultima. It's Dana Roach.
We'll be at MagicCon Vegas basically a week after this show airs, and I think it's a pretty good sign that 21 is both the number I need to hit to win in blackjack and how much commander damage I need to deal to someone to knock them out of a pod. So fingers crossed I hit both of those numbers.
Yes, I do hope you get both of those numbers. However, not on me. Please don't attack me, Dana.
Right. Fair enough. Well,
Deal.
We're going to team up on Matt, I assume. This is all directed towards Matt.
There we go. I love that. It is the two of us on this week's show, so we can conspire while he's away. I'm way into this, absolutely. Well, Dana, what are we discussing in this week's episode?
We're going to be talking about remove on-site commanders that need to be dealt with immediately.
Yes, they do. You kind of have to hold up your removal for these things, because if you don't, things could go very badly, very, very quickly. So we want to discuss the commanders that you kind of have to kill on site and why, because there are a couple of categories of them that we want to dig into and see what we can make of how many remove on site commanders there actually are in the format these days. Should be an interesting time, but we got a couple of quick shout outs to do before we dive into it. First, make sure you check out this weekend. EDHREC and Architect have teamed up with FlyQuest Gaming for the event Dual Land. That is going to be Saturday, June 14th at noon Pacific time, and Sunday starting at 11, and you can check out flyquest.gg/dualland to find it. This is a streamed event pairing up Magic and other gaming creators to face off against each other in a bunch of Final Fantasy two-headed giant games, competing for a cash prize and a $5,000 donation to a charity of their choice. There's folks like Voxy, Rachel Weeks, Krim, a whole bunch of people. Matt and I will both be there. We're excited to be a part of it. So again, that's flyquest.gg/dualland, and we'll see you this weekend, June 14th, starting at noon Pacific, and Sunday events starting at 11.
And we are proud to be partners with Dragon Shield, the premier maker of Magic the Gathering sleeves. In addition to their excellent array of sleeves and deck boxes, Dragon Shield has also released the newest version of their card manager app to help you track your collection. You can find it on both iOS and Google Store by searching for Dragon Shield. And you can also use the code EDHREC in all lowercase to get 5% off your order of anything you purchase through Dragon Shield. Just click the link down below. Protect your cards like a dragon.
Also, this show would not happen without your support over on Patreon. All forms of support help. A like, a subscribe, whatever makes the most sense for you. But if you want to throw us even $1 a month over on patreon.com/EDHRECast, that's tremendous too. And we've got perks such as exclusive content over on Patreon, or our patron-only Discord, our full list of all the challenges stats throughout the whole history of the show, a bunch of stuff over there to say thank you to our patrons. And of course, we have the patron shout-out of the week too. So this week, we want to give a shout-out to our patron, Micken. Micken, thank you so much. Support like yours is what helps us make this show exist in the first place. It means all the world. All right, Dana, now let's get into it. We are talking about commanders that you got to get rid of as soon as they hit the field. If they're allowed to untap, even one turn could completely alter the trajectory of that game and really affect your ability to contribute to that game any further. That's how dominating they can be. There are a lot of commanders that fit this bill, so we kind of wanted to categorize the different types or the different versions of commanders that can fall into the description of kill on sight.
Yeah, we kind of came up with three logical categories here to break them into. The first being just because they're powerful. All they need is basically one turn to transform the game in some way, shape, or form, either from straight up winning it or just generating such a amount of resource advantage that you'll just never catch back up. Mm-hmm. The second one is ones that are kind of a linchpin in the deck. So everything in the deck struggles without them. And it's basically the axis around which that entire wheel turns, and you need to remove that to stop the entire machine from working. Mm-hmm. And the third category was commanders that basically lock you down. If they get to play Magic, you don't get to play Magic. Right. So you have to keep them off the field for that reason.
Yeah, we want to go over a couple of different examples within these categories, many of which are certainly very famous commanders. But we also want to ask the question, basically, what do you do when every commander at the table is a remove on-site commander? Because Dana, let's be honest, they're printing a lot of commanders that have a lot of words on them, and everything is supercharged these days.
Yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy, Vivi's gotten a lot of attention for being crazy powerful, and deservedly so. But there's a handful of other really good commanders in there. Like any other set, something like Lightning might be the most broken commander in a set if this one didn't have VV in the list already. And that's kind of been the default standard. Like there's always one of these, it feels like, in every set, if not more than one of the ones that are just game breaking if they hit the field. And then there's ones that still below that are still really, really powerful and also kind of feel like you can't let them hit the field.
Yes, very much. And you know what? You just gave an example there, the new Vivi Orniteer, who we've discussed on, I think, both of our most recent episodes, because it is really lighting the entire internet on fire with how powerful this commander is, giving you mana equal to its power, dealing damage and getting bigger as you cast non-creature spells. A lot of ways to supercharge this commander, give you so much mana that you can storm off in a bunch of ways. Like this is probably kind of a dead horse. We don't need to beat it any further. That's a well-known, very recent example of a powerful commander. So let's start with that first category of these commanders are just super duper powerful, and other commanders that might fit that bill as, hey, if you're in a game against these, please make sure that you're holding your Path to Exile for when they arrive on the field. What other types of examples strike us here?
Two easy ones to talk about because we've been using them for examples for years are the two Brawl commanders from those original Brawl precon decks. Chulane and Korvald particularly stand out. Those at the time, to me, I remember like us feeling like, oh, these are the best commanders in those color pairs, regardless of what you're doing, kind of, right? Like it doesn't matter what your deck theme or strategy is. Chulane's probably going to do things in band better than any other commander, even one designed to do that thing, is going to do. Particularly with the Rise of Treasures, that is very much the same case with Korvald as well. Like it's just going to do Jund stuff better than almost any other commander is going to do Jund stuff.
Yeah, I did have that experience. I had a Lord Windgrace deck at the time when Korvald came out, and I was like, oh, Korvald would be better for my landfall deck because I'm sacrificing these lands. It would draw me a whole bunch of cards. Those are, again, very famously powerful commanders. Although over time they have dwindled a little bit. Korvald used to be among the top 15 or so, but he's down to rank 37, it looks like now. And Chulane has fallen to rank 166. So I think it is fair to say that power was very attractive at first, but maybe people have started to be like, yeah, I want more specialized stuff here and there because they are such well-known powerhouses that do indeed draw so much hate or attention in your direction when you announce that those are your commanders.
Yeah, I mean, I think they create a situation where everyone knows if you're allowed to untap with those two commanders in play, bad things are happening, right? If it hits the field and you're able to then like have mana free to do something, you're going to accrue so much value you'll never catch back up. So people respond appropriately, and I think there's probably also a percentage of people that like just found at some point it quit being enjoyable to have your commander that like did 14 things kind of effortlessly. I'm not saying that's true of everyone, or like if maybe you're playing against all of those kind of commanders and you need to play one that plays at that level, that's something you need to do. That's fine too. But I think there's definitely folks that I think have gotten bored with that as well. Like I did the thing and I want something that forces me to have to interact to make it be that powerful versus the commander just kind of doing it for me.
We've kind of described that as the primal surge problem before, where once you do the thing once,
yep, absolutely.
You're like, oh, that was exciting.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to challenge myself in a different way from now. I totally see that.
Yeah.
That said, however, some of these are still very popular. Another example that we've written down here is Joda the Unifier, which is a 5-color, technically a Legends Matter commander, but it is just one of the most supercharged commanders I think I've ever seen them print. And it's rank 15, which is why I bring it up here. So again, some of these are still sticking out very high in the popularity scores. Joda the Unifier, 5-color human wizard 5/5 commander, giving legendary creatures you control, including himself, +X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. He powers himself up for himself. Crazy. And whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, basically you cascade from your deck until you find another legend and put that on to the field. This one's wild. If you untap with this, I think the game just ends.
Yeah.
They play 2 spells, they have 4 legends, everything is getting buffed by like a minimum of 5. The attack is going to be insane. The value there of so many free spells is wild. Imagine taking one Sliver Overlord ability to pump up all of your Slivers for each Sliver you control, and another, the first Sliver, Cascade Sliver ability, and mashing them together into a single commander that cares about legends, which are getting increasingly more popular with every set that comes out. The Final Fantasy set had over 160 legends. This is stupidly easy to make very powerful, and therefore it's very popular, and therefore you must kill it.
I actually think this is generally kind of a problem with a whole lot of 5-color commanders.
Yeah, sure.
I think there's this attitude from WotC Design to a degree that like the standard attitude where, well, if it's 5 colors, it's going to be difficult to play, and therefore we can make it stronger because it will be offset by the fact that you're forced to have 5 colors of mana to cast or use activated ability or whatever it winds up being. Something that's just not remotely true at all in Commander.
Right.
The only downside to playing a 5-color Commander is you have to choose which broken cards to play. like that. The difficulty in choosing how to pare down the busted cards in your deck is the only difficult part of playing a 5-color. But I feel like to a degree they haven't entirely rationalized that yet with how they build a lot of these, because like there's way more problematically broken 5-color commanders than there are ones that I feel like, I can let you play that.
Well, here's the thing. In my example of describing how powerful Jodah is, I use the example of the first Sliver, who gives all of your Sliver spells Cascade, which I think stands as a really good example of another commander that you must kill on sight because of how powerful that ability is just on its own, even without also getting a buff to all of your creatures with your commander. So the first Sliver, rank number 72 in all of the commanders out there. Also, nuke it. Frankly, probably any Sliver commander is going to give you a problem, but especially this one who just populates the field so dang fast. If you have a removal spell, use it immediately when you can, or you best be sitting on the mother of all board wipes to solve the problem that's about to happen.
Yeah, I saw a conversation recently talking about Slivers. I think it was on Reddit, and people were like, well, 5-color Slivers is less powerful than it once was. And I don't think that's correct. I just think that there's more Jodah the Unifiers that are more powerful. That doesn't make 5-color Slivers less powerful, just because there's things that are more broken that exist.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And speaking of more broken things that exist, I mean, there was a whole year of people talking about Voya, Jaws of the Conclave, the Naya, draw a bunch of cards, buff up all of your stuff, and it has ward, why wizards? Like, why does that thing have ward? Another one of those commanders that's probably been talked about to death, but yes, if you see one of those in play, it's not just that it is really powerful on the first attack, it's also that you're playing a lot of elves in that deck too, because the commander does kind of want you to do that. So it's going to be doing so very, very quickly, and it will be able to rebuild itself very, very quickly because of the mana advantage that the rest of the deck is going to supply it with. So that is the other aspect of these. It isn't just that these decks are powerful, but the apparatus that supports those commanders also makes those things happen at a rate that is often going to be higher than an average deck is able to deal with promptly. And that is where these become a step further beyond just like, it's a problem. No, it's an existential threat to the game if it is allowed to do its thing.
Yeah, something like Miriam Sentinel Worm, where not only are you playing dragons, you're playing a copy of again, and it has ward.
Of course.
But you're making a copy of the broken dragon that you're playing, and it gets around the legendary rule, and it's just doing all of the things. And it's 6 mana to cast, but you're in green, so that's like 4 mana elsewhere. It's not really a speed bump like maybe people try to pretend it is. If that hits a field and you are able to make a copy of a dragon, you've just generated more value than anyone else is going to do in the next 3 turns, and you're going to do that every single turn.
And it's an interesting thing with Miriam, however the pronunciation.
Miriam, the 5th Golden Girl.
Miriam, I love that. Miriam is such an interesting case example here, because ostensibly what it's doing is like doubling your dragons. And in my head, I can't help but compare that to a deck that I have, which is Thalys Reverent Medium, who effectively can double up your token production. And they both sort of have that force multiplier effect on the game. However, I wouldn't look at Thalys and assume that is I must remove her immediately, because the deck can certainly still function without her doubling up those tokens. I've won games where I never even cast her once, for instance. If she's not around, the deck still does a thing. And ostensibly, that is true for dragon decks too. Even if you're not doubling them, dragons are just good. And yet, I can't help, when I look at those two things, I do feel so much more threatened by what Miriam can do than by Thalys. And so, despite them both being force multipliers, one of them does feel like, yes, I must absolutely remove that ASAP. And the other one I don't feel that way about, which is just kind of an interesting thing cropping into my head right now.
I agree with that. The difference between 3, spirit tokens or something and 6 spirit tokens isn't really that much of a difference. That's going to add up over the course of 3 or 4 turns and kill somebody in a way it wouldn't otherwise do so. But it doesn't really impact anything necessarily short term. You have to do multiple things for that to wind up changing the face of the game. Making a second copy of that 7/7 evasive flyer with 5 lines of text is absolutely game changing in maybe ways you can't recover from.
Yeah, that's got to be it. Just like the ability modification, the ability force multiplier that it's giving you with Mirim is certainly why. It's accelerating things that should not be accelerated because it makes non-legendary versions of those things. So yeah, I think that is a great example of why Mirim stands as such a bigger example of like, okay, we got to deal with that for sure, because the next turn could be deeply troublesome if it's not dealt with. I do think, though, Dana, speaking of a teamer example here, we got to talk about Storm, Force of Nature, as well. Another teamer commander where if she hits an opponent, she's going to give all of your spells Storm. One attack going off with that, it's like a Yidris, who I'll also submit as an example here. If a Yidris hits and all of your spells have Cascade that turn, the amount of value that will create is probably just going to end the game right then and there.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of Storm, too, it's going to oftentimes involve a 12-minute turn while they're getting there.
Right, yeah.
And so the best case scenario is they take a 12-minute turn trying to figure out how to storm off and win and don't succeed, and they've still taken that long turn, and then next turn they'll probably successfully do it. It's just a bad situation all around. Either they're going to take a long turn and win or take a long turn and lose, and neither of those are things you really want to deal with for the most part.
Probably we just need to, like, as this slot here, any commander that storms off, Zada, Hedron Grinder, the mono red deck, that's also very much a storm style commander. You could argue that Narset is another example where when she attacks, you get so many spells off of your deck, and there are going to be so many extra combats and extra turns that a single attack is game-breaking, game-threatening at that point. And that has a similar function of just like, and now it is going off in a way that we can't deal with. So if we missed our window to deal with it, that game is just all but over now. And there's just sort of a whole category of stormy style commanders that we could put here.
Yeah, we talked about VV before. That's kind of going to fall in that same category as well. Like just the all of the spells that are happening simultaneously. And if you stop the chain from happening in the beginning, you can, stop everything else from happening. But if you don't, if you let the commander sit there and you let it start, there's just no coming back from that for the most part. And, we've been talking about a lot of commanders that aren't necessarily CEDH playable, but like we haven't even got into the CEDH commanders yet.
Right.
Urza is, ridiculously powerful, but it doesn't exclusively see play in CEDH. Keurig is in the same situation. Vilis, Broker of Blood.
Yeah.
Those commanders do see play in bracket 3. A couple of them are game changers in the case of Urza, but those are bracket 3 and 4 commanders. They're not just CEDH commanders. And again, the amount of power they bring to the table if they're allowed to hit. If Urza comes down, it's a similar situation to VV to a degree where you just generate so much mana, 5 times as much mana as anyone else can produce at that time on every turn moving forward.
Yeah, and those are popular too. Keurig is ranked number 42.
Yeah.
There are that many commander decks for Keurig, and yeah, it letting you cheat on the mana is a huge boost. Urza is rank 49. There are 15,000 decks minimum for each of those commanders. So yes, the CEDH type of commander is definitely a thing to acknowledge here. We could put a whole bunch of commanders into that category too, but yes, the output that they have, especially with mana acceleration, is going to be truly incredible. And frankly, to dig in even further here, we've talked about commanders that can storm off. We've now just mentioned commanders that are competitive viable. There's a whole subset of commanders that fit into this super powerful category. They're so powerful they must be removed on site because they can combo off in some shape or form. Niv Mizzet Perun, for instance, when you draw a card, it deals 1 damage to any target. You slap a Curiosity or some type of equivalent where now when you deal damage, you'll draw a card, and suddenly the whole table is in a world of trouble. Or even like a Bruvak the Grandiloquent who doubles your mill. All right, cool. A single Traumatize, which mills half your library, but now it's doubled, and you're out of the game. So any combo piece in the command zone is also something you have to be super attentive to.
I mean, Gave Guru with Spores is kind of a notorious one here, where I had a friend that used to have a Gave deck, and he was not a combo player, and struggled to not just accidentally find combos in that deck.
Yeah.
Everything in that deck just turned into a combo.
I once ran the average Gave deck through the Commander Spellbook website, which can look through a deck list and point out how many possible combos there are in that deck list. Just a neat tool if people want to find out how a combo works. It's a very cool resource, commanderspellbook.com. I once put a Gave average deck into that, and the number of combos that came up were like in the hundreds.
Yeah.
Like it was truly just so incredible. Like this is a commander that you have to try really hard to not accidentally combo off that way. And there are a lot of commanders that probably fit that bill.
Yeah, absolutely. Gave's kind of the oldest, the poster child for that effect, but there's multiples that work that same way for sure.
Well, and Gave was in the original Commander 2011 set, so I think that's kind of a segue to another commander that a lot of people feel very strongly is a remove on-site commander. Also from Commander 2011 is Kalia of the Vast. 4-mana 2/2 flying. When she attacks, you get a free angel, demon, or dragon from your hand right into play. A lot of people name that as a, hey, don't let this do the thing, because it is going to be so much value so dang quickly. I guess that kind of moves us into a whole segment of like combat-y type of commanders. I think Gishath could be another example here. When it hits someone, it spits so many dinosaurs into play that you're kind of like, uh-oh, how do I keep up with this now? Would you also say that those are remove on-site type of commanders for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think because of the existence of Gishath, things like Kalia look kind of quaint in comparison.
But I would say classic, Dana. Maybe classic.
Yeah, sure. There we go. But I mean, Kalia's not really powerful, right? Like being able to drop 7 drops for free on turn 4 is crazy strong in this game. It's just that Gishath is going to drop you 4 or 5 of those, you know? So right. I guess by comparison, I would rather take a Kalia than a Gishath, but both of them are going to generate more value than a deck that isn't of that tier is going to be able to generate.
Yeah. It is the kind of thing that, like, if their plan is working, then presumably what's happening is they have a board. And so I can wrath that board hopefully later. But you do have to keep in mind that sometimes the Kalia player is going to swoop in a Master of Cruelties and KO you on the spot.
Right.
And that's kind of the problem. Sometimes that Gishath is going to come down with Double Strike. And then the dinosaurs that it gets out into play are going to draw them so many cards that they probably will have dug down enough to find a protective spell.
Yeah.
So maybe it is the kind of thing you want to stymie before that ball can get rolling. You might think you have that solution for a little bit later down the road and you don't have to worry about it now. But sometimes that solution isn't as viable as you thought it was. And that's why these can be such an issue.
You know, years ago, I remember, you'd see a Kalia deck. You're like, okay, well, I have a board wipe in hand. I can just deal with this when the time comes, wipe the board and, put the Kalia player back. If they haven't drawn a bunch of cards, they will have spent the, dragons or demons in their hand, got them into play, and then I can make my move.
Right.
Well, there is so many ways to dodge that today that didn't exist even 5-6 years ago. So many white effects, not just Tavari's Protection, things like Dawn's Truce. There's a lot of ways in these decks that didn't formerly exist to fight back against the few weak spots they might actually have.
Totally agree. We can't take some of these classic ones for granted. They are still sticking around and still very, very popular. Kalia never ceases to surprise me with how much she's maintained her popularity over the years. And one last example we'll probably give here is like, hey, this can be very, very powerful, is Krenko Mob Boss, which can tap to double up your goblins. And if that gets going, it gets going real bad. And the number of whenever creatures enter the battlefield, deal damage to every person effects that this deck can run are going to end games very, very, very dang fast. And Krenko is yet another one. That's the rank number 4 commander right now. That one saw a huge surge after its Foundations reprint. So a lot of these commanders that are so scary if they get to do their thing, they are really long lasting and they're really high up in the data. Kalia is rank number 6. Krenko is rank number 4. A lot of these have a lot of staying power for sure.
So I think those are commanders we wanted to talk about for the most part that are powerful. There's definitely some that we've missed, of course, but like you've gotten the broad idea of what we're talking about when we're discussing commanders that are just so powerful that they take over the game. But maybe now we want to challenge some stats and then come back and talk about the other 2 categories.
Yeah, absolutely. We still want to discuss Lynchpin commanders and commanders that can lock you out of a game, which also must be removed on site. And we want to answer that question about what do you do when the whole table has brought commanders that all must be removed on site? But you're right, Dana. We also got to challenge those stats because there's so much data on EDHREC that we don't always agree with. So let's get to it. This episode is brought to you by Hims, the men's health brand. I've said before that I originally thought that Hims was just a brand for folks dealing with like hair loss, for instance. But it turns out, no, they're actually a very comprehensive men's health brand, providing access to things like help with weight loss or things like sexual health. I mean, hey, I think it's cool to take your health seriously no matter what form that takes. And one thing that HIMS is taking very seriously is making sure that folks who struggle with something like ED know that they have options, and making efforts to normalize those kinds of conversations to lessen the stigma that is associated with various health problems. The process is 100% online, so you can navigate it from the comfort of your couch. When you fill out an intake form on their site, a medical provider will determine the right treatment, and if prescribed, medication gets shipped directly to you for free. HIMS has hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/EDHREC. That's HIMS.com/EDHREC for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/EDHREC. The featured products include compounded products which are not approved nor verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality by the FDA. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. This episode is brought to you by our favorite deck builder, Archidekt. Archidekt offers so many features to make your brewing experience super easy, from custom categories to helpful sorting methods, and giving you tons of data about your deck too. Color breakdown, mana curve, but also things like your probability of drawing certain categories of cards at a certain time in the game, which you know I'm using to make sure that I have a better chance of drawing both my graveyard filling cards and my reanimation spells on time. Plus, their deck playtester is undeniably the best in the biz. Super intuitive game actions, from start phases to tapping groups of cards to copying tokens to proliferating all your counters, are all handled for you with a single keystroke. And I've got to shout out my all-time favorite feature, that when you're brewing on Archidekt, you can drag and drop a card from EDHREC or from Scryfall right into your deck list. This saves me so much time not having to type while I'm brewing. Even the way that they make importing a full deck list onto the site is super easy. And you know what? Archidekt even has a creators page that shows you when updates have been made to your favorite creators' decks, so you can see, for instance, what I'm trying out with my signature Baba list, or whatever new hipster strategy Dana is currently tinkering with. You can check out our deck lists linked in the description of every video at archidekt.com/EDHRECast. That's ARCHIDEKT.com/EDHRECast. Go get EDHREC'd at Archidekt.
So at some point earlier this year, we had talked about the card Compost in Rendmaw Creaking Nest decks. Compost cares about black cards going into the graveyard. Unfortunately, the birds that get made by Rendmaw aren't actually cards, so they don't trigger Compost. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there's a card from roughly the same period in time called Reap. 1 and a green. Return up to X target cards from your graveyard to your hand, where X is the number of black permanents target opponent controls as you cast this spell. Those bird tokens are, in fact, permanents, and they let you count if you are casting Reap. So if you are looking to do recursive stuff in a Rendmaw deck, Reap very often can let you bring back a whole pile of cards for the same cost you'd get for, casting a Regrowth, or less than you'd get from an Eternal Witness, in a deck that probably isn't built around recurring that Eternal Witness. So if you are playing a Rendmaw deck and you are considering bringing stuff back from your graveyard, take a look at Reap. It's a way to maybe bring back your entire graveyard for 1 and a green if you've gotten a couple of black birds out under other people's control.
Dana, you can't just go around saying things like "bring back your entire graveyard" while I'm here, bro. I'm getting hot flashes. That's such a cool synergy.
You're gonna build a Rendmaw deck just to include Reap.
That's so dang good. I love that. Yeah. Way to take that old non-bow challenge that we've had in the past and find a better solution. That's a great card to include here. All right, I'll move to our listener challenge the stats here, and this comes to us from our patron named Corey, who has a very, as they describe, straightforward challenge. The card Doomsday Excruciator in the Wise Mothman decks. So the Wise Mothman is the #1 most popular Sultai commander right now. A legendary creature insect mutant with flying. It is Sultai 4 mana 3/3. Whenever the Wise Mothman enters or attacks, each player gets a rad counter, which of course mills you after you draw. And whenever one or more non-land cards are milled, you put a +1 counter on each of up to X target creatures, or X is the number of non-land cards milled this way. That's a little bit less important than just the fact that the rad counters are going to mill you, and the whole point of a Wise Mothman deck is often to give a lot of people a lot of radiation counters in this way to mill them and then progressively grow your board more and more. So Corey's pick here of Doomsday Excruciator is very, very silly, because Doomsday Excruciator is a 6 mana 6/6 demon with flying. It does cost exactly 6 black mana, so be careful of that, but the ability here is hilarious when combined with the Wise Mothman. When Doomsday Excruciator enters the battlefield, if it was cast, each player exiles all but the bottom 6 cards of their library face down. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card. So it reduces everyone's library total to 6 cards, and then it forces you to draw extra cards, presumably making it faster for you to deck yourself out. And that is the downside of this demon that is giving you these crazy extra benefits. But that barely even matters, because if you can get everyone to have 6 radiation counters or so, or I guess just 5 radiation counters with your Wise Mothman effects and other effects in the deck, and then you do hard cast the Doomsday Excruciator, which can be a little excruciating to do, 6 black mana is certainly a tall ask, but if you do it, then everyone has only 6 cards left in their deck. And then everyone has to mill for the radiation. And then you win real dang fast. And so, Corey, I think this is hilarious. You're pointing out that it's only showing up in 137 out of almost 20k Wise Mothman decks. This is so funny to me. I do think that more people should be giving this a shot, because just imagine the looks on their faces if they've got a whole bunch of radiation and then you cast this and now they have only 6 cards left in the deck. Sorry, this is so evil, so I can't not be on board for it. Corey, this is a hilarious challenge. Thank you so much for submitting it.
And Challenger Stats is brought to you by Cardsphere, our favorite way to turn unplayed cards into played cards. You simply send out cards that you don't need to folks who have them on their want list, and this adds credit to your account for folks to send you cards. Or you can add money directly to your account if you prefer. Build a deck your opponent's fear with Cardsphere.
Ha, nice. All right, Dana, let's get back into it. We talked about commanders that are just so downright powerful that if they get a single turn to untap, they're going to change the landscape of a game, and that's why you probably need to sandbag your removal to use on those commanders. But let's get to another category here, the Lynchpin commanders, where the entire 99 of that player's deck relies on these commanders surviving so much that if you shut down the commander, that basically stops that player completely in their tracks. What do we want to talk about for some Lynchpin commanders? What examples jump to mind for you?
I mean, I think a good place to start is our own decks that have these commanders in them. Since, we're talking about you and I, your Baby Lasagna deck and my Reki History of Kamigawa deck, I think very much function this way.
Fair. Yeah, they are huge sources of card advantage. I'm trying to sacrifice stuff to draw those cards. You're trying to play legendary things to draw those cards. And if we don't have those commanders drawing us cards when we do the thing, I feel very exposed. I feel very much like my deck completely stalls out.
Yeah, I mean, like everything is built around those. And particularly when your commander is a draw engine, you kind of don't have a choice, because you find yourself in a situation where like the draw spells that you would normally otherwise run feel redundant. Like you have, it's weird to say that you have too much draw, but like you need some gas, some things to draw into, and drawing 10 cards is fine. You don't need to draw 12. If your deck's built that way. And as a result of that, you tend to not run those spells, logically speaking. But if you don't have the commander out, you're just dead in the water so often.
That's so true. When the commander is a source of card advantage, I feel like that almost inherently will put them somewhere near to the Lynchpin status, particularly if it is the type of draw that they can do more than once per turn. That encourages exactly the type of deck building you just described. So when you were talking there, the things that jumped to my mind were like Tatiova or AC, the Simic landfall commanders that draw you cards when you play lands. You do have a feeling of, well, why would I play something like a Harmonize in this deck, which draws me 3 cards, when what I could do is play something that lets me play extra lands, and that will draw me 3 cards in a more efficient way, while also accelerating my resources. I could just play any land ramp spell, and my commander will draw me cards. So these commanders being so powerful does have a ripple effect on the construction of the rest of the deck, but that also makes them it's much more dangerous to not have them in play if you are that player.
Well, and you get weird situations sometimes too with, for example, the wheel commanders. So Nekuzar is kind of the first one that tended to really work that way, but there's the Locust God as well. There's a handful of these commanders that are built around running wheels in your deck. So those are the spells that basically make everyone discard their hand or shuffle their hand in their library and draw 7 cards. And the commanders tend to deal damage when your opponent does wheel-based things. Mm-hmm. If your commander isn't out, making there be a payoff for those wheels, then all you're doing is giving your opponents 21 cards while you're getting 7, and that's almost always very, very bad for you.
Yeah, there are going to be a couple of things that those decks run to deal some damage, like Fate Unraveler and things like that.
Yeah.
But if players have built those decks relying upon their commander, the density of those types of effects might be a little bit low. So they are probably hoping to stick that commander and then right away play one of those wheel spells. And that's why it's important for people out there to know these are commanders that you have to remove on site. And in this case, like, you know that they're going to play it on their next turn and you've held up your removal spell for that moment. Not just, okay, I'll be able to handle it on the next turn after they play their commander. These are probably commanders that as soon as they arrive are doing something really nasty. So you need to be able to respond to the spell that they're about to cast after they've gotten their commander in play.
Yeah, I mean, the Nekuzar play pattern is almost always a wheel into a wheel into a wheel and you're dead.
Yes.
Like that's how it tends to be how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that doesn't give you any breathing room, or doesn't really give you, like, the way to respond to that is to remove the commander.
Yeah.
That's it. That's like really your only option.
Yeah, another example that fits in the same category is Heliod the Radiant Dawn, which does have to transform. You have to meet a certain condition for it to transform.
Yeah.
But then it is giving all of your stuff like flash and reduces the cost of all of your spells for each card that your opponents have drawn that turn. You have a moment to deal with it before it transforms. But if it does transform, I think that that's the point of no return. There's no more dealing with this. Yeah. The amount of advantage that they have been given with their mana advantage here and the flash and the number of cards that their deck is designed to draw in the first place, I don't think you're coming back from that. So you have to deal with it before it gets to that point, before the point of no return.
Right.
Well, and some other commanders jump to mind as we're talking about this exact play pattern here, Dana, where you do want to save up the spell for when they play it, because the commander is probably going to be deployed, and then right away there will be a very deadly follow-up. So I kind of think of my own Conrad deck here. I think there are going to be plenty of versions of Sir Conrad that can probably even survive without Conrad being involved and dealing damage when stuff leaves your graveyard and when stuff dies. There are going to be versions across the board here, but I think that plenty of Conrad lists will fit into that linchpin idea, where if you get Conrad and then you play a single spell, a Foot Bottom Feast or whatever, to empty your graveyard, and then he does so much damage, the play there does have to be, I've saved my removal for the arrival of that commander.
Yeah.
Because then, if the commander's not there, all that they did was take a bunch of stuff out of their graveyard. And that's sort of spinning your wheels, a la if you remove the Nekuzar in response to someone casting a wheel spell. And so it's sort of that linchpin style that we're kind of going for here.
Yeah, like everything is revolving around that Conrad. And if it fails to be in play when the thing resolves, whether it's the Foot Bottom Feast or, even like a Bajuka Bog trigger or something,
right?
Then all they've done is hurt themselves versus destroying you, basically, right? Versus winning the game,
Truly, yeah. Well, and to kind of pick on Matt while he's not here, I honestly think his Jetmir deck probably fits into one of these categories as well.
Yeah.
That is a commander that, like, when he plays Jetmir, all of his 1/1s are going to turn into no longer 1/1s. But if I have held up my removal, which I will for basically the whole game, awaiting the arrival of that Jetmir, then they will just stay as 1/1s. And they won't become 9-power double strike. He's going to end the game immediately. And that's sort of why we have to focus so much on these single points of, can I make the deck fall apart? Can I stall them out long enough for me to be able to win despite what they've been up to? If the deck is just, okay, I emptied my graveyard. If the deck is just, I played a wheel and got no benefit, or I just have some 1/1s, that is the moment where we have to focus on how do I scupper these commanders so that I can actually survive in the game.
Well, and we touched on this with some of the wheel commanders, but like, there are ones where if the commander isn't in play, the cards that they're casting are actively like problematic and can cause the caster the game. Like they're detrimental to have if the commander isn't in play.
Yeah.
Obeka, Brute Chronologist, it comes to mind here. Like it's a commander, has a tap ability. Player whose turn it is may end the turn. A lot of times you're running some of those red extra turn spells there, the Final Fortunes, that are very efficiently costed, but you lose the game if you don't win at the end of that extra turn. Obeka gets used to, like, with that trigger on the stack and the turn, so you bypass that trigger.
Yeah.
Well, if Obeka isn't out, then you're just running some very, very dangerous extra turn effects that are probably going to cost you the game if you can't bypass that trigger.
Totally. These could be very risky commanders to play for exactly that reason. There's some, I think it's called Ideas Unbound. I might be getting the name wrong. It's just like draw 3 cards, but at the end of the turn, you'll have to discard 3 cards. Well, Obeka can just turn that into I draw 3 cards because I end the turn in response to the discard trigger, and haha, I no longer have to discard those cards. But if she's not around, then that card just kind of sucks. And the extra turn, but then I lose. Just kind of sucks. So yeah, it does make the game far riskier for those players, and you do kind of knock them out of the game completely if you have those on lock. I'd think too about your lock kind of fits into this category as well. The Jund commander that reinstates mana burn. It gives everyone a whole lot of mana to use. So if your lock's not there, converting all that mana into damage, then you're just playing group hug on accident, and that's probably not great for you. Doesn't seem to fit your plan, maybe?
Yes. An accidental group hug feels like it's not going to work out in your favor very often.
Right. And I think one last thing I'll shout out for Lynchpin commanders too. Any Voltron deck.
Yeah.
If the whole deck is focused on trying to get those 21 points of commander damage, but you can't keep your commander around. Yeah, kind of a problem. The deck probably doesn't function.
Yeah. I actually, one of our Patreon videos recently, I talked about my Arden SEO equipment deck, and I made a point to point out I'm running multiple lands that can turn into creatures in that deck, specifically to deal with that issue. I usually suit up SEO with all my equipment, and that's what I swing in with. Well, having creature lands available after someone board wipes, I can just replay Arden, spend 1 mana to turn that Mutavault into a creature, and then put all the equipment on it and still swing in. But without those, I'm stuck waiting a full turn and hoping like nobody has a response for me to play SEO, wait till I can actually attack the following turn, play my other commander to suit it up. Like, yeah, that's a huge problem if you're a Voltron commander, and you need to find ways to work around that, or you're very much dead in the water if your commander gets removed.
Absolutely. So, okay, those were some Lynchpin commanders, but now, Dana, let's move to that third and final category. Commanders that, if they get to do their thing, they lock you down. I consider this category the Matt Morgan special, if we just want to really annoy the crap out of him.
Literally just thinking Matt's going to be upset he's not here to talk about Turgid.
I think it's fine. I think it's fine that Matt's not here to rant about how much he hates Turgid again. We can do so on his own behalf, or listeners, you can fill it in your head. You've heard him complain about it plenty enough.
Right, yeah.
And he's not wrong. Turgid is going to force a bunch of discard from everybody. What are you going to do after your hand is empty? Any discard commander kind of feels that way. I think there's a strong reaction to other commanders like Toxrill and Maha, which reduce the power of your opponent's creatures in a way that basically will prevent them from having any creatures in play at all. If these commanders get to stick around and do anything, you don't get to do anything. And that is probably an issue, and probably means that you need to focus your attention on them right away.
Yeah. And particularly in something like Turgid, it's not just the discard, it's turning the discard into things that your opponent can then use.
It's so wild.
There's like so much value in that discard in that particular deck. It's something that you just can't let hit play, or you can't let it sit around, or you are just never going to be able to do anything for the most part.
Yeah. Any commander that has like removal as a piece of its abilities. I kind of feel this way about Zakama, for instance, which is sometimes known as a storm commander. And it does have a cast trigger to untap your lands. So often killing it is not even a great solution. But if Zakama's allowed to do stuff, all of its abilities remove everybody else's things in play. I don't want that to happen. I need to shut down that player from ever being able to get that huge dinosaur in play so that I can keep my stuff around. Or Marika Rebarrett is a commander that I flirted with at one point. I tried building that. It can tap to steal an opponent's thing, and when she untaps, she'll destroy the thing. I was like, ooh, this seems fun. And it turns out I drew a lot of hate my way because people want to keep their stuff. Lo and behold. Wild, I know.
I built this deck, Joey, probably 10 years ago, and had it for like 3 weeks. For that reason, it like just created such slow games because people didn't want to play their cards.
Yeah.
It made just for bad play patterns for everyone.
Yeah, I've noticed that with another here that we could put in this category is Judith, Carnage Connoisseur, which gives your spells Death Touch. So since she is red and black, you can play stuff that does 1 damage to all creatures target opponent controls, and she'll make that 1 damage Death Touch damage. And now what you have is a huge force of removal right there in the command zone. So if she gets to do stuff, you're not going to be able to keep creatures in play. So in order for me to engage with the game, I have to kill Judith. Like all the time. I must kill her immediately. I do like necromancy. I like killing my own creatures. I often have death triggers. It's very nice. But I like doing that on my terms, not on her terms.
Right. Very much so. Yes, absolutely. And because it's a repeatable effect, it's the difference between a board wipe and a board wipe every turn. A board wipe, okay, this thing just happened. I'm going to try to rebuild faster than you and take advantage of this. Well, if that happens every turn, there's no rebuilding. You just can't do anything. And that sense of futility is definitely frustrating sometimes.
Yeah. And I think we've also got to shout out sort of the controllier versions of this too, not just destroying your stuff, but countering all of the spells. Commanders that if they do get to stick around for a good chunk of time, they're going to be able to stop everything that you're up to. The most classic example I would put forward here is Mizzix of the Ismagnus, the Izzet commander 4-mana 2/2 that gives you experience when you cast bigger and bigger spells, and then for each of your experience points, makes all of your spells cost less. The whole deck can just be full of things like Syncopate, X and a blue to counter a spell unless the opponent pays X. Well, as they're getting more and more experience counters, as they continually cast more and more of these types of spells, it becomes impossible for anyone to play anything, because all they have to do is stop your spell with a single mana every single time, and they keep getting more experience for it. Once Mizzix locks in, you're locked down.
Stopping your spells for a single mana while refilling their hand with, the Blue Sun Zenith kind of spells out there for also just a couple mana and in drawing, 10 cards.
Yes, very much. There's a whole bunch of control style commanders we could put into a category like this. Mizzix, I think, is a good classic example, but honestly, there are a lot of other examples coming to people's minds right now. But like the control commanders are also the ones that you have to pay very careful attention to, and probably need to remove their ability to keep doing that to you as soon as you have the available moment.
Yeah. So having talked about these three categories of commanders kind of in broad strokes, what do you do if you sit at a pod and you have to deal with this commander? Because statistically speaking, there's going to be one in every pod, or two, or sometimes three in every single pod. Like how do you handle that?
That's just it. They're making so many commanders these days with so many words on them that it's starting to feel like every commander is a kill on sight. Every commander is I gotta nuke it or else. So if you only have a small number of removal spells in your hand with whatever hand it is that you've got in that game, you do have to be choosy. You have to be really choosy, because if you're up against, a Mizzix player over on that side, but then a Keurig player over here on the other side, and someone else is playing Slivers or whatever, and then the other reality is that frankly, I'm probably playing one of those myself. I brought Conrad maybe. Who the heck knows? It's just like, I think it's very possible that a pod of 4 decks is going to be all commanders you must remove on site. So then how do you choose? I personally start with a simple basic of trying to evaluate what is an existential threat to everyone at the game, as in if that goes off, the game is over, versus which ones are just a threat to me, or are they a threat to an individual person rather than threatening to end the game? That is, I think, my first baseline of trying to do threat assessment when I'm in that situation.
That's the bar for what you have to let slide has definitely changed over the years. Even not that we talked about Kalia being a threat, but like really, really often nowadays, if you sit in the pod, I'm like, well, I can wait a turn to deal with that because this other thing I can't wait a turn for. Like, oh, well, Kalia doesn't have haste. Okay, I have a turn I can breathe and figure out what to do about that problem, whereas I have to deal with this VV problem right now.
Yes, yeah. I think that's the other piece too, is like, what types of answers do you actually have and where can they be pointed? If you think you might be able to fog some of Kalia's later combats with an Ink Shield or something spicy like that, then maybe that does prioritize, okay, the Spellslinger deck I have fewer answers for, so that's why I've got to go after that one as well. So I like that too, knowing not just which answers you do have currently in your hand, but which other answers you could have that help solve things even further down the line, as well as the timing issue that you just mentioned. At what point is this going to become the full issue? Could that Kalia player be a problem in 2 turns compared to the Vivi player being a problem the very next turn, or literally as soon as it hits play?
Right, yeah. One of the things I've found myself in the last few years doing more of is running more of the kind of enchantment removal that doesn't knock the commander back to the command zone.
Sure.
Sorcery speed, although some of the blue ones have flash, so there's some limitations there, but like the ability to turn the commander off but not let your opponent recast it unless they have some tech in hand, buys you some breathing room. Like, not that Swords to Plowshares is an amazing card, because it absolutely is, but there's plenty of these commanders where like you swords that and it's just back next turn.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Whereas if you do use some of those you were mentioning, Darkstone Mutation is a famous one. Amphibian Downpour is the blue one you mentioned with Flash, and it's really good because you can hit multiple targets with that one.
Yep.
Those can sometimes feel a little bit bad in some games because you in answering their commander, you are trying to shut them down completely. If they did their thing, the game would probably be over, but now you're doing a thing that stops them from engaging quite as much in the game. And there can be sometimes almost an inverse feel bad that comes with that. But
yeah,
I don't know. I don't feel quite as bad about doing that to a Jodo the Unifier. I think I'm okay with it personally. I don't know. I think that's what I need to do to be able to play.
Yeah, it's definitely this weird design situation we found ourselves in here to a degree where a lot of these commanders create this situation where one of us doesn't get to play.
Yeah.
Either I let you do the thing that your commander's doing, it's going to hit the field and it's going to do the thing, and I'm going to lose, or I keep your commander from doing the thing, and more often than not, you're going to be unable to play and lose. And I don't necessarily love that play style that some of these commanders have created by forcing that choice.
I understand that. I think hopefully a way that can be helpful is sort of reframing what do the thing actually means in some contexts.
Sure.
I've made a video a while back about I was playing against a Bruna player, and Bruna, as folks probably know, as soon as she attacks, she's going to enchant herself with so many things that she'll commander damage you out, gain 14 billion life, and be basically untouchable for the entire remainder of the game.
Yeah.
If she does the thing, she winning that game, or at least knocking one person down, and it's nearly impossible for other people to deal with her. And collectively at the table, we all were like, we got to kill the Bruna player before they can do anything. And that Bruna player had such a great attitude about it. They're like, yeah, I know. My version of doing the thing is putting pressure, a time limit on this game. I am a ticking time bomb. And they totally understood why they had to be dealt with first. And that was such a nice, great attitude. And I hope that we all can sort of inject that a little bit into our understandings of our own decks, because sometimes we are the must kill on site player. And knowing the pressure that you've put onto your opponents so that you don't hit that point of no return, I think is a very healthy mindset for us all to be aware of when our commanders are such looming swords of Damocles over the battlefield.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think we're going to see some maybe problems with that arise in the next few weeks, given what a popular character Vivi is. And I think there's lots of people who played Final Fantasy and just adore the character. It's got great art. Like, I understand there's so many reasons to like Vivi, and I can't let you play Vivi, or I am going to lose. So I feel like there's definitely some commanders where, like, for the most part, if someone's brewing an Urza deck, like, they know what's up. They're aware that your opponents are going to be responding. I do think we're going to see some situations where, like, people that normally wouldn't brew that style of deck are going to brew a Vivi list because they like Vivi as a character, and they're going to feel real bad when they're not allowed to play it. But there's a reason you're not going to be allowed to play it, because if you are allowed to play it, your opponents are just going to lose the game.
This is how we wind up in situations where people are like, it's not that Yidris deck, but then it is.
Sure, right.
And so like being very aware of what that reputation is with super powerful commanders like that should hopefully train everyone out there to understand what the difference is going to be between that Vivi deck and just, I like this character Vivi deck. So hopefully that can be useful for folks to bear in mind as they're playing some of these, because Dana, you're totally right. Fan favorites, but also super powerful. You have to kind of do your research on your commander to make sure you understand what reputation it is carrying into a game. And for everyone else out there, another final tip, I think, about, how do you navigate an entire table full of kill on site commanders is learning to sandbag a little bit better. I understand that an angel player is attacking you for 15, even 20 damage or whatever. And yeah, that is a lot. But if you only have one removal spell on you and there's a storm player, the teamer storm over there, and if she gets to attack, then she just wins the game on the spot. I would rather take the 15 damage than lose. And so like you do have to end up weighing out what is actually the worst possible consequence. Yes, one of those things is indeed very bad and often a justifiable reason to use removal, but one of those other things is an existential threat, and you've got to get more in tune with that and less reactionary. So sandbagging is going to be a thing that we all have to practice. Yeah,
it's very much about like seeing the big picture and making your decisions based on like the big picture of the game multiple turns down the road versus like right now, today, this moment, this second.
Yes, I really like that description for sure. Dana, there are so many commanders that we got to remove on site. This was a fascinating episode. I hope that folks have learned a lot with it, and I hope that we've all gotten a little bit more aware of how powerful our own commanders can be, because let's be honest, we are all playing them. We submitted some of our own examples within this very episode. They're fun to play. And that type of swinginess in a game can be awesome. We just do have to be aware of their reputations and therefore calibrate ourselves how that affects how we engage with our opponents and how we engage with the amount of heat that our own decks are attracting as a result of all of that.
Absolutely. And good luck to the person, because it's going to happen. Someone in Vegas is going to wind up in a triple VV pod, and that's going to be a lot to deal with. So Godspeed to you, person who's the fourth player in that pod.
Amazing. That's so funny. All right. Well, Dana, this was a really fun episode. Can't wait to hear from listeners about other kill on site commanders that they think exist out there in the format. Let us know which other commanders we didn't mention that you do think also meet one of these three categories. But with that, Dana, let's call this episode to a close. And if people want to get in touch with you online, where is it that they can find you?
You can find me online at Dana Roach. I'm writing articles for EDHREC, and you can find all of us together at patreon.com/EDHRECast.
And you can find me everywhere online, from Instagram to Blue Sky at Joseph M. Schultz. And you can find the cast online at EDHRECast. And don't forget, this weekend, June 14th and 15th at about noon is the FlyQuest event with EDHREC and Architect. Go to flyquest.gg/dualland to learn more. That's flyquest.gg/dualland. And of course, if you'd like to get access to any exclusive content, you can support us over on patreon.com/EDHRECast. Hop into our Discord, get access to exclusive videos and more over at patreon.com/EDHRECast. Listeners, we'll be back at you next week with more data and insights, but until then, remember, EDHREC your deck before you wreck your deck.